We spoke about physical wellness, mental wellness, and now it's time to move to the third face of the pyramid, which is nutritional wellness. We know that food is a pillar of our health, and as Hippocrates once said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. In terms of healthy longevity, are there any guidelines we can provide?
Well, Hippocrates, who was the father of modern medicine, talked about the importance of food. The problem is, in Hippocrates' time, there weren't major conglomerates and big companies trying to shove processed and pre-processed foods down the faces and throats of everybody around the world. So the first thing is, it was probably easier to let medicine be thy food in Hippocrates' time because he basically grew stuff and ate stuff, which is definitely still the healthiest way to go. So my first cardinal rule of nutritional health is if it doesn't expire for the next 5 years, don't eat it, all right? Processed foods have all kinds of unhealthy chemicals. People talk about looking at the labels, and if your mom didn't know what it is, you shouldn't eat it. I think that's great advice. And so it's a big challenge, and increasingly a challenge where pre-processed foods are so easy to get, but they're really laden with all kinds of things that are not great for us. So what are some of the changes that happen with aging, and how does our eating change over time? So the first thing is that our body needs more protein as we get older. And so, there are different equations for this based on which nutritionist you talk to, but generally a great rule of thumb is if you're an average 80 kilogram person, which is about 160 pounds, you need 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. And again, that can go up more if you're doing more strength training, but that's a good ballpark place to start. By point of reference, an egg is about 6 or 7 grams. So you're looking for basically that spread out over the course of your day. That's a lot of protein. It's tough for people to get that much, but that's really what the science tells us is the best way to start thinking about optimizing your diet. When we think about how to make the most out of your daily calorie breakdown, I think a good starting place or guideline is 40% carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not a dirty word. 30% protein and about 30% fat. Obviously the healthy fats, things like avocados and almonds and healthy types of fats are wonderful for you, and that should be part of your diet. So some of the common nutritional mistakes people make include not eating breakfast or not eating enough protein, loading up sugar, particularly first thing in the day. When that happens, you end up spiking your sugar. You have an insulin response, which then bottoms out your sugar, and you feel really lousy later in the morning. Too much caffeine can be a problem, as well as processed foods, excess salt. All these are things that can really lead you into nutritional problems. As I talked about during our sleep, accessing the assistance of a nutritional health professional, a nutritionist, somebody who's used to working with athletic people can go a very long way. But even before you do that, there are different apps and ways to start looking at the way you can maximize your nutrition. But my take-home points on this are thinking about increasing your protein and trying to get a good ratio of protein to carbohydrate to fat, and staying away from processed and pre-processed foods. And that's a really helpful way. How do you deal with the food issue yourself?
Well, my mom used to tell me that if you can't say the word out loud, if you look at the ingredients behind the box and you can't pronounce the word and you don't know what it means, then you probably should not be eating it.
So mom was straight on there, and I think that's really important information. And then, when we start thinking about, things you can do to be healthier, lots of leafy greens, and if you're going to do carbohydrates, which are not bad for you, but trying to put some higher number of complex carbohydrates, grains, and whole wheat breads instead of white breads. It's not that you're sometimes sourdough bread's awesome. I love it myself, but trying to balance out what you do, I think makes a big difference, because the thing you want to avoid is that high glucose spike, and you can get that from eating too much glucose at one period of time. And then also trying to balance out your fuel over the course of the day is a really important strategy that I've learned to really employ over time. I actually put together a lecture for an upcoming conference looking at the things I've learned over time to keep my own body exercising and relatively good performance. And one of those was thinking about my nutritional strategies. I used to not think about this stuff at all, and now I think a lot more about it, and it's really helped me.
Would you say that superfoods are a good way to get all of your nutrients to the body? What are your thoughts on that?
So superfoods, and I talked before about oxidative stress, free radicals forming in your body. And oxidative stress is basically counterbalanced, first of all, with lifestyle. I talked about kind of diet and sleep and exercise, but it also can be counterbalanced with an antioxidant diet. And that's where we hear about the wonderful superfoods. And we love superfoods, things such as, and I'm the world's biggest fan of blueberries. I am a blueberry hoarder. Also, as talked about, vegetables, leafy greens, things that, make sense to do, are medically better for you, and those are very, very helpful. So the key to these antioxidant foods are foods that contain polyphenols, and these are natural antioxidants, definitely any kind of berry, dark chocolate, black tea, black olives, plums, cherries, all great superfoods that the idea of these foods is they are antioxidant in their makeup and they can really help. And this is not just my opinion, by the way. There have been several studies looking at the importance of these superfoods and their role in antioxidants. And so putting some of these superfoods in your life can really be helpful for you as you think about your diet at any time, particularly your diet as you age. The other important piece here are the flavonoids found in leafy greens. And so there have been science looking at the effect of ingesting flavonoids. It makes sense. Your mom says eat your salad, I'm sure she told you. And leafy greens are a great source of flavonoids, which also have an antioxidant property. So the polyphenols and the flavonoids together can reduce oxidative stress in your body. And that correlates to lessening your risk of chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease, all the types of problems chronically that happen. Diet is a big piece of this equation.
What about omega-3s and omega-6s? Would you say that those are important as well?
They're definitely important. We hear a lot more about these, and increasingly more so. There's a great term that we are hearing more called inflammaging, which is the aging process from inflammation. And this is, this concept is exactly what we're talking about, longevity, and longevity is directly related to inflammation. Inflammaging, you will age faster if you have ongoing inflammation. Things like obesity and what you eat and what you do, all these things make a difference. And this is where this discussion about omega-3s and omega-6s fall in. So just quickly, omega-3s are found in things like salmon and fatty fish. They really help with this concept of oxidative stress. They are also an antioxidant. They can help reduce inflammation in your body. Omega-6s are found in many of the processed foods that we have, and the ideal diet has more omega-3s and less omega-6s. Now, it's impossible to live in the Western world and not take in omega-6. In fact, it's valuable, but what you're looking for is a ratio of omega-3 to omega-6, and you want your ratio to be as close to 4-to-1, 4 omega-6 to 1 omega-3 as possible. Unfortunately, many of the Western diets are kind of 10, 11, 12 to 1, much more in processed, less in things like fatty fish. So eat salmon a couple times a week, which I love salmon. I'm a big believer in salmon, and I probably do have it a couple. My brothers make fun of me, but I have probably salmon a couple times a week, and I think it's probably helping me. I hope so. I beat my brother in the marathon last time, so something had to be good there.
It's definitely the omega-3s.
Thank you.
100%. Let's talk about fasting. That is a big trend and a big topic at the moment. Would you say that fasting does have protective effects against cancer, diabetes, heart disease, or would you say it's just a calorie restriction strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the answer is that we definitely eat too much. But as I mentioned, I'm a big believer in protein and meals. And so it's tough to get in your daily protein requirement if you're fasting. So, I think that fasting may be a weight loss strategy. It's definitely not a maintenance strategy, and particularly for people who want to be athletic. I'm not a big believer in fasting, and I think the fasting craze has kind of died away somewhat. We have seen some help with kind of eating window for people, which is essentially probably a glorified way of talking about fasting, but not as strict. I think there's probably more value. We've talked about that already, like not eating within 3 hours before bed. That's basically giving yourself an eating window. But I think the science behind fasting is not as convincing as is somewhat behind just getting less unhealthy food and maybe less food overall. And when you eat and what you eat definitely make a big difference here.
That's interesting. I mentioned earlier that I fast before pretty much every morning. I'd say Monday to Friday before 12. And I fast because it helps. In my mind, I feel like I'm more focused. But between 12 and 8, I'm probably still taking in as many calories as I normally would. So I think it's a way of me not overeating, because I think if I didn't fast, I would just be in a surplus all the time because I love food so much.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing, yes. But it's a way of detoxing in my head. And speaking of detoxing, another big buzzword. It's another word we hear a lot. Are there benefits to it? And how do we detox the body? There's a lot going on.
Again, I think this is one of these concepts where, it's a nice idea, but there's been like people with IV therapy and all kinds of weird stuff. The body has a built-in filtration system. It's called your liver. And you should love your liver every day. So how do you protect your liver? Well, if you have unhealthy diet, unhealthy behaviors, all the things we're talking about, that can affect your organs, including your liver. And liver function is one of the tests we routinely get when we get laboratory tests. And people who are unhealthy may well have elevated liver functions as part of what we see in their profile. So love your liver. You naturally will detox. And the whole idea of like sweating out impurities, sweat is sweat. That's probably not true. I think the key thing is sticking to the things we're talking about. Maximizing your diet, getting the right kinds of balance of foods, eating in a really healthy way for yourself, hydration. Those are all great things to think about as you take care of your body. So I think the whole idea of detoxing through external methods, I'm not a big fan of.
So you would say, I do want to take it back to fasting because I think that is a huge thing at the moment. Would you say that it holds any value, any type of detoxification?
I think what we're looking at are what are some of the trends that we're seeing, what is evidence-based, what is subjective. My general feeling is if it doesn't hurt you and you like it, keep doing it. I mean, there's a lot of value in that, and everybody's body is different, everybody's exercise routine is different. I know that for me, I exercise first thing in the morning, and then I go see patients, starting at 8 o'clock, I'm in my office seeing patients. And so when I wake up at 5:30 and start exercising, if I don't eat by 7:30 before I get to work, it's tougher for me to stay focused throughout the day. So everybody's a little bit different. Could I be a better Jordan if I didn't eat till noon? Maybe, but I think my patients wouldn't be too happy about it. So I think everybody's different, and it's important to think about how those differences, may work or not work for you.
Because my eating window is so short, it could be hard for me to hit my protein goals as well. So I actually have to take supplements to make sure I hit those goals. Now, I know that supplements can be misguiding and disorienting. Is there anything that everyone should take, like a multivitamin in the morning? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think supplements, I get a lot of questions in my office about supplements. And, like many doctors, I am inherently a little bit skeptical about supplements, primarily because it's a non-regulated industry. So what is in a supplement and what is claimed to be a supplement may be true and it may be not true, may be partially true. So I'm a big believer in making sure you know what you're putting into your body. That being said, I think I am warming to the idea, particularly around some of these protein supplements, that if you're unable to get what we think is a healthy amount for you, supplementing may not be a terrible idea, though I am going to underscore here, I'm a much bigger believer overall in natural sources. So the first question you asked about multivitamins, I think is probably somewhat mixed. Your body and the natural filtration system of your body will generally get rid of what you don't need. So if you have a diet which is deficient in vitamins, certain vitamins, taking a multivitamin is better than having a vitamin deficiency. But if you have a well-balanced diet, it's probably superfluous for you. So I think you just have to think about, do I need that multivitamin? And is that making up for something like, I think your illustration, I'm not getting enough protein, makes more sense than I'm just gonna randomly take a multivitamin because.
So vitamin B12, vitamin D, for people who live in special populations, would you recommend that they take a supplement?
So vitamin D levels that are low have been linked to bone problems, also depression, and vitamin D is activated by sunlight. So if you're in London or Scandinavia or some place where it's like cloudy all the time, and especially in the winter, that's been linked to low vitamin D levels. So vitamin D supplementation, particularly in the winter, probably is helpful. Vitamin B12 is found in animal protein particularly, but if you're a vegan, that can predispose you to anemia if you have vitamin B12 deficiency. So vitamin B12 supplementation, particularly for vegans, may be valuable. Again, if you're going to start doing vitamin B12 supplementation, probably safe, but you may want to talk to a nutritionist just to make sure.
What about the people who don't love salmon as much as you do? Omega-3s.
Everybody should love salmon. But if they don't, I think omega-3 supplementation, very reasonable to do. And your grandmother gave you cod liver oil. She was well ahead of the curve when she started thinking about that. Was omega-3 dense.
What about the superfood supplements, so the polyphenol supplements?
I think, again, berries, that kind of stuff, have them around, eat them by the handful, no problem at all. If you're not getting those, I think these are perfectly safe to do as a secondary way of getting polyphenols if you're not getting enough from your diet.
I have to say it because I do love training, and creatine has been all of our best friends since we started training, creatine and protein. What about both of those?
I generally have no problem with people taking creatine if they want to try it. It's naturally found in fish and meat and chicken. But if they're not getting those kind of foods and they want to try and supplement their creatine, the dose is about 5 grams per day. It's certainly safe and nothing, there's probably no downside to doing it. Protein powders are, I think, a good way to supplement protein if you're not getting enough protein in your diet. Again, similar to what we talked about before, about 1 gram per kilo, you can add up what your protein requirements are, and you can kind of ballpark and see how you feel when you do that. But I've increasingly been convinced that there's probably some value in both of these, but I would really emphasize that I'm a bigger believer in getting these types of things through your diet.
There are a few supplements that are nice to have or won't hurt you, and are there ones that need further testing?
Yeah, I think there's a couple in this category where we're kind of learning more about them. You will hear about them. One is called spermidine, which is a protein found in cheese and in wheat germ. If you don't eat cheese and you don't eat wheat germ as part of what you do, this protein has been linked to your increased ability to basically get rid of dead cells in your body, a process called autophagy. And so there's probably some value in that. Certainly can't hurt you. And one that we're hearing more about is actually one of the oldest drugs known to humankind, metformin. So metformin actually has been around since ancient Egypt. It's been around a long time, and there's some enthusiasm now in the longevity space around using metformin to increase insulin sensitivity, meaning increase your body's ability to control hyperglycemia, high blood sugar. One of my good friends is one of the leading researchers on metformin in the world. He loves prescribing metformin, but he's also not an avid exerciser. So in my mind, metformin is something you may think about if you're not doing all the things we're talking about. But if your glucose is well controlled, if you've taken the glucose tolerance test, a fasting glucose test, meaning you get your glucose value the morning after fasting and seeing what your body is naturally doing, metformin may not be any value to you at all. But if you're somebody that's struggling with those values and you're already doing some of the things we're talking about, there may be some role in talking to your physician about metformin. It's a prescribed medicine, so that's definitely not one of these supplements that you just go out and take. You need a prescription to take it. But interestingly, there was a study published in 2002 in the New England Journal of Medicine looking at the effect of pre-diabetics on 3 basic roles. Number 1 was nothing. So they were diagnosed with prediabetes, and over the next 3 years, what was their likelihood of getting diabetes? Number 2 was using metformin, and number 3 was using exercise. And they looked at the risk of developing diabetes. 11 of the 100 subjects in the control group, meaning they didn't do anything, just got diabetes, so about 11%. About 8% of the metformin group got diabetes. And in the lifestyle group, only about 6%, 5.5% got diabetes. So what that tells us is that lifestyle modification is probably the most important thing. And that's where we should really focus our efforts. So just jumping on a pill because it's easy is not the message I want to give people. I want them to work on the things we're talking about to really maximize their own longevity.